Have you ever wondered how Erwin Smith can convince a group of terrified soldiers to willfully ride to their deaths? Or how Pixis convinced hundreds of broken troops not to rebel and help plug a rock in wall rows? Or how Armin saved his friends from execution by proving their innocence, despite holding one of the very monsters that caused them so much havoc? It is obvious they were persuaded, but you ever wonder how it was done? Ever thought what it will be like if you had the same power of delivering epic speeches to sway others to your side? If so, then look no further. In this video, I will go through some of the very techniques that Erwin and the others employed, which will help you become better in persuasion. Even if you're not a charismatic individual or a great leader like the three aforementioned, you can still utilize different techniques to make yourself more persuasive and better at speaking/writing. To start, we need to go back to the old battle-tested art of rhetoric. Generally, if you want to know how effective something is, you check how long it has lasted. Rhetoric, in this case, has proven the test of time. It was developed by Aristotle long before at the time of ancient Greece, and it is still talked about till this day. Rhetoric can roughly be translated into the art of effective or persuasive speaking/writing. The ancient Greeks called it Rhetoric, the study of rhetoric or the art of argument. The main basis of rhetoric suggests that to persuade an audience, there are three main modes of appeal that we must use. Three primary ingredients that aid in persuasion. They are logos, an appeal to reason, ethos, an appeal to ethics, and pathos, an appeal to emotion. All three of these would make the rhetorical triangle, and most of this video will be discussing these three appeals, as well as going through some examples from Attack on Titan. Let's start with logos. Logos is using logical reasoning to persuade your audience. As mentioned earlier, it is an appeal to reason. Logos is persuasion through reasoned discourse, through the use of logic. Examples of this are stating truths, real events, facts, and so on to sway the audience. Next up, we got ethos. Ethos is using your credibility to persuade the audience. Ethos relies on showing your audience that you are a credible person of knowledge, ethics, character, and so on. All this ultimately proves that you are trustworthy. Usually, this is done indirectly, and there are many ways to do this. For example, giving proofs to your claims, stating your experience and expertise, your own emotions, as well as subtle examples of your character. Ethos works particularly well with logos, as they both synergize with each other. Facts are more effective when they are trustworthy. Ethos was something Armin was in dire need of during his speech, which I will show later on. Finally, we have pathos. Pathos is used to inspire emotions and make the audience feel a certain way, ultimately using that to persuade them. While the other two use logic and credibility, something you have full control of. Pathos uses emotions of the audience to sway them. Some examples can be making the audience feel afraid, happy, concerned, joyful, all to aid in your persuasion. Another example would be, if you want to convince someone to go somewhere with you, getting them in a joyful mood may help you in that. Ethos and pathos sometimes get confused with each other. Pathos is the emotion you want the audience to feel, while ethos would be the emotions you carry to add credibility. Those are the three modes of appeal. One relates to logic, reason, another relates to emotion, feeling, and one relates to ethics, credibility. Now, which one would you say is the most important? It was Aristotle himself that argued that logos itself is the most important form of the three. If you're having a conversation with educated, scholarly, and intelligent folk, that would be the case. All that said, the most important of the three would depend on the person or audience you are communicating with. For some, they are more moved by pathos. Some base everything entirely on logos, and for some, they only acknowledge your argument with ethos. The importance of each of the modes of appeal will vary depending on the person. Once you find out what a person resonates with most out of the three, it is an indicator of what you must focus on. Like the X for a treasure chest, you know the area you must dig in for effective persuasion. That said, focusing on all three appeals is good practice and it will ensure the most success. The more you think about the triad of rhetoric, and the more you apply it to your everyday life, the easier persuasion will come to you. If you would like to learn more, there are plenty of resources online. You can even check out Aristotle's actual work on rhetoric. With all that done, we can now go through some examples, starting with the master of epic speeches himself, Erwin Smith. Erwin had the most terrifying situation to be in compared to the others. The Beast Titan was raining down rocks, showering the scouts with death. The group is surrounded by titans, and the chances of survival is slim to nothing. Your troops consist of fresh recruits, humanity's greatest soldier, and the greatest commander in the history of the scout regiment. Erwin concocts a plan to eliminate their leader, but for that to happen, all the soldiers need to act as bait while Levi slices his way to the Beast Titan's neck. Erwin had a handful of terrified, despair-riddled recruits, and he had to somehow convince them to ride to their deaths when they could have just abandoned the squad and do whatever they pleased. Even after mentioning that as an option, Erwin would get every single soldier there to ride onto their last mission, all on their own accord. Let's watch the king of all speeches in Attack on Titan. Let's learn from its greatest speaker, Erwin Smith.
Then who cares what we do? We could just disobey your orders, and it wouldn't mean a thing, would it?
Yes, you're precisely right. Everything that you thought had meaning, every hope, dream, or moment of happiness, none of it matters as you lie bleeding out on the battlefield. None of it changes what a speeding rock does to a body. We all die. But does that mean our lives are meaningless? Does that mean that there was no point in our being born? Would you say that of our slain comrades? What about their lives? Were they meaningless? They were not! Their memory serves as an example to us all! The courageous fallen, the anguished fallen, their lives have meaning because we, the living, refuse to forget them! And as we ride to certain death, we trust our successors to do the same for us! Because my soldiers do not buckle or yield when faced with the cruelty of this world! My soldiers push forward! My soldiers scream out! My soldiers rage!
This speech has great use of logos, ethos, and pathos. It first starts off with Erwin dropping pure facts. He states the plan, and the terrified recruits have trouble digesting the situation. Flock asks him if they are all going to die, and Erwin flat out tells the truth. No sugarcoating, no deception. This directly builds the credibility of the speech and the speaker, Ethos. The main way of persuading the recruits via Pathos was talking about meaning. He states how they will all die via crashing rocks. He lets the group know that everything, including their dreams, hopes, and moments of happiness, will not be of importance at the moment they are dying on the battlefield. Everything that you gave meaning to will not help you in the upcoming mission. Erwin ripped their hearts out and left a gaping hole inside of every recruit there, and Erwin fills that hole by giving them meaning through this mission and their eventual death. This is an appeal to emotion, which I will expand on in detail later. Erwin pretty much says that you cannot change how you will die, but what you can change is what you make out of your death. Regardless of dying, that does not mean your life and death has no meaning. He brings up their old, dead comrades to build onto the pathos. Bringing up their sacrifices must have struck a chord inside everyone. He gave meaning to the dead, and through that he gained credibility, since it will soon be Erwin and the recruits who will die. If anyone did not trust Erwin, they would at least trust the hundreds and thousands of dead comrades, because the dead do not lie. The soldiers' lives and their eventual deaths now had meaning, appealing to their emotions. In pretty much all of Erwin's speeches, his raw emotion and character is a great show of ethos. When he starts yelling, it accentuates the point and demands attention. When a man of his caliber shows such emotions, it shows you how important and dire the circumstances are. Now back to Pathos. If you wanted to rally your troops and you just straight up said you all are going to die, you'd think no one would get inspired and they would just give up. But you see, that's what Erwin did. and the exact opposite happened. He turned the emotions of the recruits from being filled with despair into brave, inspired soldiers raging to their deaths. One thing to note was the polarity of Erwin's speech. He goes back and forth with the soldiers' emotions. He lets you know the hard, harsh truth. We are all going to die. He addresses what's gnawing at everyone's mind at that moment. We have suffered our whole lives. A whole kind has suffered. And now we are all going to suffer dying. In this scenario, Erwin destroys any hope for survival among his comrades, and through that loss of hope, they will now fight no matter what, sort of like a dog backed into a corner. They can't go anywhere else. They may not survive, so they might as well fight till they no longer can. It is sort of similar to the old adage of burning the boats when arriving for war, so that there is no escape. That way, you only focus on the task at hand. Although they did not destroy their way of escape, Erwin, being dead honest with them, had a similar effect since there was no escape. With the soldiers accepting the harsh reality of this moment, he does something that gives anyone strength during the harshest of times. He gives them meaning to their suffering. One of my favorite quotes is from the book Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. In some ways, suffering ceases to be suffering at the moment it finds a meaning, such as the meaning of a sacrifice. Erwin did exactly that for all his troops. This is what shifted the emotions of the recruits from being paralyzed with despair to being inspired enough to ride to their deaths. Although Man's Search for Meaning is not related to this topic, it is a book I highly recommend for everyone. Now back to the speech. A melancholic speech had now taken a full 180. He took the soldiers to the lowest of lows and then to the highest of highs by giving meaning to their deaths and amplifying it all through the memory of their comrades. This polarity is what intrigues us as human beings. Having something stable, normal, and predictable is not as entertaining as someone who can go between both ends of the spectrum. Imagine that, two ends, two opposites, and being able to seamlessly traverse between the two ends. This is effective in changing the emotions of the audience, and that is exactly what Erwin did. He went from being flat out depressing when telling the truth to giving the greatest emotional speech these soldiers have ever heard. He first ripped their hearts out, and then he replaced it with one that will get them through this suicide mission. Next up, we got Commander Pixis. Wall rows had just been breached. Titans have flooded inside the gates once more, and all the soldiers are rightfully terrified. They begin to panic, some close to going mad with fear. Many wanted to rebel, and many were plotting to run away. Just as tension reached a fever pitch among the crowd, the commander made his presence known among the masses.
Take note! The blueprint of the Trust recovery operation is this! Our primary objective is to reseal the hole. Yes, you heard right. What's more, it will be done manually. As for how the task will be done, that's where this fellow comes in. Allow me to introduce Cadet Aaron Yeager.
What the hell?
Don't let appearances deceive you. This young man is in fact the successful product of cutting-edge science. Fantastic as this may sound, Cadet Yeager possesses the ability to fabricate and control a Titan body at will. Recall the massive boulder roughly a league from the gate. Having assumed Titan form, Cadet Yeager will hoist said boulder on his back, schlep it to the hole, and voila! And this is where you all come in. Your job will be to defend him. Yes, defend a Titan against his own kind. The spy!
To hell with you! My family gets the time I have left!
Traitors! I'll kill you where you stand! Desertion is answered by death! Anyone wishing to leave will, by my personal order, not be charged with treason. Those who have seen a Titan firsthand will not be expected to revisit such horror again. Whomever this applies to, you may leave with my blessing. Additionally, anyone with family or loved ones they would spare from the same trauma may also leave. The Crown will continue to recognize your service. Thank you and good luck.
I couldn't live with myself. My daughter's my all. Daddy's coming, sweetheart.
Now, think back 4 years ago. Namely, the operation to retake YUMIYA. I bring it up because you all deserve to have your suspicions confirmed. Officially, we labeled it reconnaissance, but in fact, as most of you probably know, it was little more than a purge, a thinly disguised exercise in population control. We knew this in our hearts, of course we did. Yet we turned a blind eye. We supported the state-sponsored myth because the deaths of our fellow human beings allowed us to survive. Pure and simple. The guilt is ours. We share the blame. All of us. The citizens of YUMIYA sustained themselves on the wholesale slaughter of the refugees who'd flown to us for help. But turnabout is fair play, is it not? If YUMIYA succumbs, the population will fall by a whole other order of magnitude. The lands comprising Walsina wouldn't support half the people now living. If we're wiped off the face of the earth, the culprits will not have been the Titans, let me assure you. No. We'll have done it to ourselves. If the line isn't drawn now, it won't be drawn at all. If we must die, let us die here!
When everyone is terrified, when they convince themselves to abandon hope, many persuasion techniques won't even get through to them. Straight logic about the mission will not work against a terrified crowd. Credibility will not help when many have made their minds to abandon their duties. This leads us to emotions. The highly emotional soldiers needed something to cling on to that was stronger than the fear of their own lives. They needed an emotional response that was stronger than what they already had. Many were thinking about spending their last moments with their families, and Pixis used exactly that to persuade the troops. Pixis used that polarity in speech that I mentioned earlier. He would go on to say that everyone is free to leave if they are experiencing fear. But then he mentioned whoever wants their loved ones to experience that same fear may also leave. Checkmate. This destroyed the walls of resistance within the soldiers' minds. It made all of them think of the worst case scenario, that the Titans will reach their families. He appealed to their emotions by reminding them what is at stake, as well as the consequences of losing to the Titans. Then, to add on to that, he explained how the last mission's main objective was to thin the population. Many soldiers doubted that mission's true objective, and many knew deep down, but Pixis confirmed it, increasing his credibility, or ethos. He explained why this was needed, because humanity could not sustain themselves in such high numbers behind the walls, providing logic to the equation. Then finally, he states how humanity would perish not by Titans, but by each other if it was not done, bringing Ethos, Logos, and Pathos together in this speech. He brings this whole mission up because if the soldiers do not fight right now, they will have to repeat that mission. Now, how would you feel as a soldier if you were told that the ones before you were sent off to die? Armin and the others must have been infuriated, but it was Pixis and his persuasion, his skills in rhetoric, that made them understand that it was a necessary sacrifice for humanity. If all of that was said by someone else with no skills in speech or persuasion, it very well could have incited a rebellion instead. The element of surprise is another thing that will captivate crowds. Doing what others least expect you to do is always a great way to grab their attention. This is what Pixis did in his speech. Everyone knew they had to fight, but Pixis would surprise them by telling them exactly what they wished they would hear and how they could leave. This was a play on the audience's emotion, pathos. The final example would be Armin. Armin became one of my favorite characters after his monstrous speech. I actually did a video on his speech on another topic, check that out as well. You can see the three modes of appeal in Armin's speech. Armin was not put in a situation where he had to inspire troops. Instead, he was put in a fatal do-or-die situation where he had to de-escalate a crowd and gain their trust. Armin and his friends were held at gunpoint, and only he could get them out of this situation unharmed. When backed into a corner with nowhere to run, the young Armin, who was often portrayed as a coward, showed us the true strength he had hidden deep inside him.
Collect my thoughts yet, but I can do this. I'll just have to think as I talk.
Halt! Is this supposed to be your true form, monster? I don't buy it! I'll give the signal to fire! I mean it!
Eren is not a foe of humanity! We're willing to cooperate with military command and share everything we've learned about his powers!
Your pleas fall on deaf ears! He revealed his true form, and because of that threat, he cannot leave here alive! If you insist he's not an enemy of ours, show me proof! Otherwise, we'll blast him back to whatever nightmare he crawled out of!
You don't need any proof! That's right. There's no need at all. The fact of the matter is, it doesn't matter what we perceive him to be!
What?
The reports say hundreds of soldiers saw him, and those who were there say they saw him fighting other Titans! And that means they saw him get swarmed by the Titans as well! To put it plainly, the Titans saw him the same way they see each and every human being, as their prey! And it doesn't matter how else you may look at it! That is an irrefutable fact!
In this speech, Armin is asked for proof on whether Eren is a traitor or not. Armin hits the captain with pure logic. He states the reports, the eyewitness testimonials. He persuaded many with his irrefutable facts, but not everyone. The doubts were still there. Captain Vorman still did not trust him, and started to ready for an attack. Armin himself understood the situation very well. As mentioned, the captain was possessed by hysteria, to a point where logic had no effect. It was then, Armin, with a burst of emotions, did exactly what he needed to do.
Eren! Mikasa! I am a soldier! And I have dedicated my heart to the restoration of humanity, sir! Nothing could make me prouder than dying for such a noble cause! If we were to use his Titan ability and combine it with the manpower we have left, I believe we can do it! We can retake this city! For humanity's glory, and what little time I have left to live, I will advocate his strategic value!
Armin, straight from the heart, delivers an epic speech, showing his true loyalty and credibility as a soldier, displaying the ethos that he needed to buy some time. He starts off with a salute, and states that he is first and foremost a soldier. He is just like all of those around him. He is just as willing to lay his life on the line. This salute is sacred to the soldiers. It is what they are taught from day one, and it is done till the day of their death. The salute is something that the soldiers never forget. Armin knew that logos or logic did not work, so he opted for ethos, and that brought many over to his side. The sheer emotion he displayed made it hard not to believe him. He then lays out his plan, using bits of both logos and pathos, the logic stemming from the plan's details, and the pathos coming from the hope he set off by potentially retaking the city, as well as his dedication to risk his life for humanity as a soldier. Armin's speech is a great example because it shows us that even if you use logos, pathos, and ethos masterfully, you still may not be able to persuade everyone. This comes to show that this isn't a one-way ticket to being able to brainwash everyone, but rather a set of tools that you can use to increase the effectiveness of your persuasion. Although Armin failed to persuade the captain, he did end up persuading everyone else, including Pixis, who would give them a chance to prove themselves. That wraps up the 3 examples of rhetoric. Learning and mastering these 3 modes of appeal will help you become a better writer, speaker, and persuader. That said, there are more things you can do to improve your skills in these domains. In terms of speaking and speeches in general, you need to have a strong voice, strong body language, and confidence. Through this, you can be seen as an exceptional leader and a more charismatic person. All of this is a process. It doesn't come overnight with the addition of one theory. Consistent practice is the best way to get good at this. For your voice, the best advice I can give is practice. If I'm being honest, my verbal skills have always been lacking, but that gives me even more reason to make videos and hone my skills in that regard. It may sound odd, but one effective way you can get better at this is by repeating your favorite speeches or dialogues. By breaking down speeches or regular forms of persuasion, you can get a better understanding of them. For example, repeating and studying Erwin's speech. Honestly, this can be used in anything. It doesn't have to be just speeches. What is important is that you are 1. Practicing, and 2. Imitating someone competent. Through this practice, you will find that you will be getting better at emulating them. And if you do it enough, you will eventually integrate their skills onto yourself so that it comes naturally to you. For writing, reading some of your favorite works, or just writing on them or analyzing them will help you get better. Imitating your favorite author's writing style will help you learn more about it and give you a deeper understanding of things. I have been saying use your favorite works or things you enjoy because that is what will keep you interested. You can always go over real life works rather than fiction if that interests you or keeps you motivated. This is for those who can't seem to find the motivation. With all that said, it is still important to expose yourself to more challenging works since that will also help you grow. For speaking, articulation, enunciation, and pronunciation are all important if you want to improve your ability to speak. Articulation is learning how to make effective words or sounds through your different vocal body parts, like tongue, teeth, jaw, lips, etc. For example, if you try speaking without using your tongue or jaw or mouth, it will change how you sound. Pronunciation is saying the word correctly. It entails making the right sound for the word, as well as using the correct version of it. This includes past, present, and future tenses of the word, silent letters, syllables, and so on. Enunciation refers to how the individual speaks, rather than how a word should sound. This includes how clear you are in your speech, as well as how audible your words and sounds are. Examples are mumbling, speaking with a high or low pitch, speaking too quickly, too slowly, and so on. Of course, these things will change depending on the language. This is why in dub and sub you may hear different ways to say some words like names. For example, Bertold and Pixis. In the dub that is how they are pronounced, whereas sub they are... Taking those 3 aforementioned things into account will help you better transition into new languages. If all of this is confusing to you, just know that saying things correctly and speaking correctly will go a long way, just like writing things correctly. Not being able to articulate, pronounce, and enunciate effectively takes away from your ethos, your credibility. Same thing with spelling and grammar errors. Deliberate practice is the best thing you can do to improve on these skills. For example, if you are not sure of the pronunciation of the word, search it up and do some research. This is something I do even for my videos, and I probably should do more of it. One of the simplest things you can do to increase your public speaking skills is focus on the 3 things mentioned above to speak effectively. I have been at fault for not speaking well on my videos, saying some words incorrectly, and even being hard to understand. It's a common and honest error that can be conquered through practice. One technique that can help with the aforementioned was used in the past by Demosthenes, one of the greatest orators in history. He was known to stick pebbles in his mouth and speak in order to increase his skills in enunciation and articulation. That said, if you do the same, there are many other alternatives you can use for pebbles. But the point is, keep trying to find fun ways to challenge yourself and continue your growth. Expanding your vocabulary and improving your diction will also help in increasing communication skills. For example, cacophony, which is the use of harsh sounding words, and euphony, the use of pleasant sounding words, will help you become a better speaker, writer, and make your work more entertaining and persuasive. Using these words can help you portray more emotions and feelings. Using harsh sounding words will aid in bringing a more scary atmosphere, and using pleasant sounding words will bring a more comforting atmosphere. These are just a few examples of rhetorical devices you can use which will take your writing and speaking skills to another level. Using and studying these different rhetorical devices like symbolism, foreshadowing, and so on is highly suggested if you would like to become better. I won't be going through all of them in this video since that will take forever, but do some research and check out the various forms of them if you would like to learn more. Read different famous and non-famous works, view and practice different speeches, and through this you will find yourself getting better. Lastly, use the 3 modes of appeal in your life and you will find yourself becoming an excellent orator, just like Erwin, Pixis, and Armin.
I will advocate his strategic value! I am a soldier, and I have dedicated my heart to the restoration of humanity, sir!
Take note! The blueprint of the trust recovery operation is this! If we must die, let us die here!
これが本物の敬礼